Continuing in the Gospel of Matthew, this week's reading is chapter 15, verses 10 through 28. I want you to, Matthew, in this story shows up in all of the Gospels, but in Matthew, the woman is referred to as the Canaanite woman. And Jesus is in the district of Tyre and Sidon. So I just want you to be aware, before I read it, when it says he is there, these are districts that are outside of Israel. They're outside of the Jewish Israel community, and they're actually considered Canaanite areas. And when you hear the word Canaanite, when you hear in this gospel, or really in the New Testament, when they refer to Canaanite, it's really another way of saying Gentile, outsider. Because the Canaanites, by this time, that Jesus have been wiped out. But the word Canaanite really refers to outsider, Gentile. It's kind of derogatory in a way. So just listen to these, beginning with verse 10. Then he called the crowd to him and said to them, "Listen and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles." Then the disciples approached and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees took offense when they heard you said that?" He answered, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Let them alone. They are blind guides of the blind, and if one blind person guides another, both will fall into a pit." But Peter said to him, "Explain this parable to us." Then he said, "Are you also still without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth enters the stomach and goes out into the sewer? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this is what defiles. For out of the heart come evil intentions, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile." Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." And she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. May the hearing of these words add insight and blessing to your lives. Oh, that's hard. I just think that's hard. I just hate reading that. Every time I read this in any of the Gospels, I struggle with this vision of Jesus who is being so mean. It feels so mean to me when Jesus says to this woman who's an outsider, Jesus who, in my understanding, as I understand and as I follow, is always meeting people where they are and offering healing and hope and inclusion, right? And it's like, wow. He just totally told that woman she's a dog. And it doesn't bother anybody. It bothers me. But then he goes on, right, to actually heal her daughter. So I like to think about how Jesus changes in this moment, maybe, or maybe not, because in the Gospel of Matthew, the story's a little different, right? It starts with that context of him talking about what goes out, what comes out of your mouth versus what goes in. Because in that time, right, there's so many rules. I mean, that's what it's about, right? All these rules we make up to cause trouble for one another, like to make things hard, to really become oppressed. We oppress each other in so many ways, including in the church, right? We set up these rules on who you can eat with, who you can talk to, who's okay, who's in, who's out, who's a sinner, who's not a sinner. Same thing in the first century, right? There were so many rules about eating and purification, washing your hands, eating with the right people, having the right place when you eat, not eating with the tax collectors and other sinners. You know, all these rules. And Jesus is saying, you know, that's not what, it's not, you're missing the point. When you get caught up in that, you're just missing the whole point. It's not about enforcing these rules. It's about living the gospel and the good news and letting that come out and speak and live from your heart so that people's lives can be touched in a positive way. Back in the first century, when they talk about demons, by the way, demonic possession was really about being oppressed, and it had to do with the empire, Roman oppression. Remember that little story where the demoniac in the synagogue says, I am legion? It's like a reference to the legions of Rome. I am legion, I am many. So demonic possession was actually directly connected in their way of thinking and understanding to the oppression of empire and the injustice of living, that you could be oppressed by a demonic force by trying to be in alignment with empire in an unjust way. That would be considered a demonic oppression in some ways. So we don't know what form of oppression this woman's daughter is living with, but we know she's living under some form of horrible oppression that is controlling and oppressing her. And it's interesting to me that Jesus actually goes, Jesus leaves this teaching where he encounters, where he's talking about what's coming out of your mouth, what goes into your mouth. He leaves and goes outside the realm of Israel. He goes to the Canaanite area and districts. You ever ask yourself why? Why would he do that? Why would he go into their area and then insult them by saying, I'm not here for you? You know, back in the day, back in the maybe 70s, 80s, really even before that, in the LGBT community, the bars were very important. They were the only safe places for people to gather, right? They could gather in these bars. It was actually illegal. That's what the Stonewall riots were about in 1968, 69. That people just got tired of being harassed by, but they would gather in these bars, and the bars would be kind of, you couldn't really recognize it, even through the 80s and 90s. You know, they were always really dark. There was no light in, the windows would be covered over and stuff because they didn't want people to look in and see that the LGBT community was gathered. But in the 80s, I remember, I have to admit, I remember, there would be this curiosity, right, amongst people who were not part of the LGBT community. They became sort of a fun little thing to do, right? They get like a group of friends together and we'll go. It'd be like really scary and fun to go to a bar, a gay bar, to go in, maybe see a drag show. be so fun, like humorous and fun. They would come into that space that was not theirs. It was a safe space. It was belonged to another people that had claimed it as sacred and safe, and they would come in where they were welcomed. But there would often be this tension between, if you come into that space and pretend to enjoy things and to participate, then the assumption is that you're kind of safe, you're an ally, right? You're claiming that you're a safe person for people who are feeling oppressed and have gathered in a safe space, and you've entered their space, so you must be a safe person. But that wasn't always the case. Sometimes it wasn't always the case. When I read this, this is what image conjured in my mind, is this idea that Jesus goes into this space that isn't his. It's outside of Israel. It's the Gentile or the Canaanite area. He goes into that space intentionally, into it. And then this woman comes to him. She sees him. Can't you just feel her hope? Like she believes, there's no doubt in her mind that he can help her, that he can free her daughter, that and he is there in her space, in her home. So he must be willing. Imagine the hope that she must have had. And then to hear the words, no, this is not for you. Or maybe Jesus was testing his disciples, because it's really the disciples who said, oh, you should send her away. She's yelling and screaming. Can you imagine what would happen downtown Olympia if we sent everybody away who was yelling and screaming? It's being too loud. Maybe it's a test. Maybe he's sort of trying to, remember how it begins. He's beginning with this: what comes out of your mouth has the potential to defile more than what comes in. You should be worried more about what comes out rather than what food you're eating and following all the proper protocol. You should be more concerned about what comes out. And what do the disciples do immediately? Get rid of her. She's too loud. We don't even know why we're here, but geez, send her away. Maybe it was a test for her. Maybe it was an opportunity. I'm not sure. But when she pleads with him, she doesn't even plead. She's sassy. I like this woman. She's super sassy. She is. She's just not gonna go away, and she won't be dismissed. She almost is demanding. For justice. Can you imagine? Like, to actually demand justice. To actually demand that the son of David, who she obviously believes is the son of David, is this Savior, is this Messiah figure. She believes in who he is, that she demands justice from him. And Jesus says, your faith is strong. Go, your daughter is healed. I wonder what would happen if two things with the church and in our lives. Two things, I wonder. What would it look like if, instead of believing that we should be about welcoming people, always being a welcoming, like we could welcome anybody in. What if we, which is great, don't get me wrong, it's important, but what if we flipped that around a little bit and realized that we're in somebody else's space, and it's a little bit arrogant to welcome them in to their own space? What if we realized and understood that we are in somebody else's space? What can we do to bring justice, not only for ourselves, in the name of God and in the way of Jesus, but for all those who live in this space? For all those whose this space should be safe and feel safe. What would happen, I wonder, if we made that adjustment? I wonder. I would really like the way those words came out and the change that it might have in the world. May it be so.